Hi, this is Rukmini and welcome to part 3 of 5 of the Habits for Health series. If you've not watched the first 2 parts of the series, I do recommend that you watch them so that you have a better grasp of the technique that I'm about to share in this video. So in part 1, we spoke about a powerful way of creating micro habits for holistic health. And in part 2, we spoke about physical health and the areas that we need to work on physiologically. In this part 3 of the series, we will focus on mental health. Of course, that's a vast topic in itself, and we're not going to talk about any specific mental health issues, but we will focus on some tips to enhance and sustain mental health as a matter of habit. Now, here's something to remember about health in general. It is that each aspect of health influences and impacts another. This is particularly true in terms of mental and emotional health because they're very closely related to each other. And at times it's often difficult to distinguish between them. There's this quote by the neurologist Dr. Joseph Ledoux, who says, who clarifies that connection. And he says that emotional systems tend to monopolize the brain resources. It's much easier for an emotion to control a thought than for a thought to control an emotion. Now, how this works is explained by this really simplified diagram of how our brain processes. Any stimulus or life experience enters our brain using our sensory organs, sight and touch and smell and so on. Right? For example, when we see a horror movie or we hear a good news or we smell a cake being baked, that's how experience enters us. Now, the natural tendency of the brain when it's left untrained is that it processes the sensory data in an emotional manner. That is called the low road because the organs and the neural pathway that's required for emotional processing is quite literally located in the lower middle part of the brain. That's why the low road. So for example, if I smell a cake, I may process it emotionally and be happy because some childhood memories come up. Or I may see a horror movie and experience fear, even if I know logically that it's just a movie, I'm not really experiencing it, I'm in no real danger, I still experience that fear because the emotional pathway is accessed. However, we have an option to move to the higher road instead. What this needs is for us to pause, even if it's just for a microsecond, to train our brain to delay response to the stimulus and allow the neocortex, the logical, rational part of the brain, to respond. In this case, my response to the same stimulus are likely to be logical and very oriented and rooted in the present. So for example, I may smell a cake and I might become curious about what flavor it might be. Now, the good news is that we have synaptic plasticity, right? Which means that our brains can be trained to think in a logical, rational manner so that we don't unnecessarily get caught in unpleasant emotions that we don't want to experience. By itself, remember, there's nothing wrong with the emotional pathway. It's just that it needs to be accessed at the right time, right? So when we access the neocortex, the logical pathway, the higher road, when it's really needed, it helps to enhance our mental health. The more we do this, the more we build new neural pathways, and thus we strengthen mental health in the long run. So here's one habit that we can build for mental health. It's borrowed from the discipline of mindfulness, and this is often referred to as the ABCD technique. A stands for anatomy, and it's the first step in the process. Now, this process can be followed in a linear manner as one consolidated habit, or you can also take up individual pieces of this process and use them as habits by themselves to enhance mental health. So A stands for anatomy, and this is about finding a conducive body posture, which, for example, is about if I experience myself having low energy and I'm slouching and my posture is not great. First step is to find a conducive body posture. Sit on a comfortable surface, make sure that my spine is erect, then I'm breathing better, and that by itself lifts my mood. It changes my energy, right? So that's the first and the critical step. The next step in the process is breath. Breath is a very powerful anchor for attention because we always have breath within us so long as we are alive. And when we place attention on our breath, all we need to do is to observe the sensation of the belly rising and falling as we inhale and exhale. Right? And this is our main task during this habit training. The C here stands for counting. As a support to as a support for concentration to observing the breath, it's helpful to count. So as you're breathing, you can count the number of your breath. One way to exercise this step or this habit of counting is to start at one, count at every out breath so that you know that the one breath is done, two breaths are done, and so on. One way to maintain attention is as soon as you reach to 10, start counting backward from 10 to 1. That's a way of maintaining attention using count. Okay, so that's another technique you can use. And the last step is D, which stands for distractions. After a while, when you practice A, B, and C simultaneously in a linear manner, for example, you will find at some point that you're not actually observing your breath anymore, but you're engaged in some sort of distractions, like you may have some thoughts coming in or some emotions, or you're distracted by some sounds and smells and so on. This is absolutely okay. It's natural. It happens to all of us because our senses are constantly interacting with the environment. Now, without suppressing or pushing away the distractions, all we need to do is to notice and then return attention to the breath. If necessary, shift the anatomy, shift the posture again if you feel it's changed somehow, and then shift attention to the breath, start counting again, and the process comes back and you're centered again. Now, the more you work with this, and you can also work with some other mindfulness techniques, the better your mental health is in the long run. So let's wrap up by anchoring some new habits around mental health. Now, if you've watched part 1 of this series, you know that the first step in creating a habit is to find an anchor, right? An existing habit or a routine that you know you engage with every day. Once you found that, next, identify a short new habit that you want to incorporate and then attach it to the anchor. Right? So, for example, some habits around mental health could be that after I have my breakfast, I will take 5 deep belly breaths, right? Breaths that go right down to my belly. Or after I finish a virtual meeting when I'm working from home, I will straighten my back and correct my posture. Right? Remember that we need to keep our habits really short, 30 to 60 seconds at the most, so that they're easy to implement. And with that, we will wrap up this video here, and we will talk about emotional health in the next video. Take care.
Help Talks are daily health-related talks held at Health Education Library for People, Mumbai, India. For more information visit www.healthlibrary.com. Subscribe to Help Talks channel. Be better informed about your health.